Zach is back. It's the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Welcome back in from the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios. This is the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey, 920 a.m. in Bucks, Burlington, and Mercer counties, or worldwide on the web at 920thejersey.com. We continue to mourn and celebrate the great life of Mike Pettine Sr., who passed away at the age of 76 years old, and he had a great impact at Central Bucks West for many generations and had so many wins and put so many kids in college. And we all know the wins, a 326-42 record, 2 big win streaks, one of 45 games and then one of 55 games. And the man that was a confidant of Mike Pettine Sr. was Mike Carey, the longtime assistant coach at Central Bucks West, and he's kind enough to hop on board and give us a few minutes right now as we celebrate the life of Mike Pettine Sr. Coach Carey, we appreciate the time. We send our condolences, and how are you?
I'm hanging in there, Zach. It's a tough time, but it's my pleasure to talk about Mike Pettine.
Well, thank you for coming on, and we do greatly appreciate it. You played for Coach Pettine, and then you got to spend a lot of years coaching with him, to say the least. What made your relationship with him so special?
I think just that, because I'm one of the few that actually played for him, went through the grind with him, and played for him when he was 26 years old. And then after my college and brief professional career, I came back and ended up coaching 24 years with Mike, and then rose the ranks and became from a position coach to defensive coordinator to assistant head football coach, and then took over the program as head coach when Mike stepped down.
You've had so many great memories with him, both on and off the football field. Take me back to the first time you remember meeting Coach Pettine and what that experience was like.
Well, I can tell you this. I was 14 years old, and my dad took me up to a speed camp, which, again, Mike was many, many years ahead of the curve in terms of innovations. And so this is like 1968. Takes me up on to a speed camp, and it's the summer before my sophomore year, and I hear this booming voice, and this guy, he's about 6'3", 180 pounds, and arms that are real long, and they're flailing around like an octopus, and he's screaming at guys, and I'm like, holy shit! Sorry for the word, but I gotta play for this guy. And Mike was a guy that, especially early in your career, his demeanor, his voice just kind of froze you.
That's unbelievable. When you first wanted to coach with him, because you knew him, what it was like to play for him and how intense he was, what do you remember about the conversation when you said, hey, Coach Pettine, I want to coach with you?
Well, it didn't really go like that, because I was my short pro career was ended in a car accident, and Mike called me up and said, listen, I know you got a teaching degree, which I did get at University of Pittsburgh, a secondary education degree. And he said, listen, why don't you think about coming back to Doylestown, and, maybe we can get a part-time job or a full-time job at CB West, and I'd love to have you on my staff. And I was still beat up from the injury, and, it was just a tremendous gesture. It kind of shows Mike's heart. And so I came back and joined his staff, and ended up being with him for a long time.
A story like that just shows the way that he was able to be ahead of the curve and really just connect with his players. And we hear stories about how he connected with other teams' players and helped them get into college. That ability to connect, why was he just so able to get it and touch so many lives for so many years?
I think that the big thing is that Mike he was multifaceted as a person. You look at him, and if you're in the stands, you see this intense demeanor, but he had many, many sides. Extremely intelligent guy, a very, very family-oriented guy, a guy who loved his kids, and then as he got older, loved his grandkids. Very soft side to him, a side where he went out with the coaching staff and, had a good time. He loved to laugh. Mike was a great storyteller, a great orator. When he speaks, he captivates a room. Tremendous public speaker. So he had all these sides. And he said to me, because I asked him many times, I said, why don't you take the opportunity and go to college? He had so many colleges asking for his services to coach with them. And he said, Mike, this is my spot in life. I love coaching and helping young men from 14 to 18.
Mike Carey with us right now on the Zach Gelb Show. You mentioned his son, Mike Pettine Jr., who everyone also knows in this area and went on to be a head coach in the NFL with the Cleveland Browns for 2 years. We know that at times they were on the same team and then coached against each other. But when Mike finally got the job in Cleveland after seeing all the diligent work that he put in, just how proud was Senior of Junior?
Off the charts. Mike was, like any father or parent, would love to see their children do better than them. And, Mike was one of his kids that do very, very well, And the only time that went against the grain, of course, was when we were coaching against Michael's teams. And as much as Mike wanted to see Mike Jr. do well, he wasn't about to concede and allow North Penn to beat CB West back in the day. But when Mike got the job with Baltimore as an intern in the video room, Mike was extremely excited. And to watch him grow through the ranks and then finally get the head job, he was as proud as any father could be. And Michael Jr. did a great job of keeping Mike Sr. involved. Mike was doing stuff with film each week.
Larry Brown, the legendary basketball coach, he was once telling me in a conversation that I had with him saying it's no fun to coach against your own friends. And I can't even imagine what it was like when Senior and Junior would go up against each other, but the close relationship that the father and son did have. Take us back to those weeks leading up to those games and how intense Mike Sr. was the weeks he had to coach up against Mike Jr.
Yeah, it's a great memory. It surely was 3-4 notches higher than the intensity that he normally had, which was off the charts, because these games were not only against his son, but they were for the right to get to the state playoffs. Every time we played Michael's team, they were either undefeated or had one loss, and a couple times we were ranked number 1 in the state. They were ranked number 2. So, to get to where we wanted to go and to achieve our goals, we had to go through North Penn and vice versa for them. So there was no way that he was going to concede anything. I will say this, though. I firmly believe, and Mike has never said this to me, but I think that one of the things that pushed Mike into retirement, because I thought it was an early retirement, he was 56 years old, was the fact that it was such a struggle to play against his son. And, maybe the thought was there, okay, I've won many, many titles. Maybe it's time to let my son do that. I took over the next year. I surely wasn't going to allow that, and we didn't. But after that, North Penn did some great things.
When you took over, did you feel like it was your obligation just to give it another year or two? Because I know from hearing stories you weren't going to plan to be there for another 10 years as the head coach, but did you feel like it was your obligation to Coach Pettine for all that he's done for you to just stick it around for another year or two?
Well, Zach, initially, I just got done telling the story this morning on to another service. Initially, both of us going into the 99 season were pretty much at the end of our line. And I actually didn't even come back to the weight room until May, which is unusual because I was very active in the weight room from January on. I didn't know whether – I just didn't have the fire. And so when the season ended, Mike called me up right before Christmas and said, hey, I'm stepping down. And this was in 1999, right before 2000. And he said, I'm stepping down, and we just had won the state title, the 45th game, and Andrew Elson had blocked the punt. It was a tremendous ending. And I said, I'm stepping down also. And he tried to talk me out of it, and he said, look, let's meet over the holiday, which we did. He came to my house, and the agreement was, after he talked to me, I said, okay. He goes, look, just take it for a year or two to transition Randy Cuthbert into the job. And that's what my agreement was. And after I knew about three-quarters of the way through that first year, again, we were then took the 45-game win streak, and we're up to 59. And the pressure, and it was just physically daunting. And I knew that was it.
You knew when he walked into your house that day that there was no way you were going to walk out of there without saying yes, right?
Exactly. I mean, Mike, I had to give, Mike, he didn't want a yes man. That wasn't me. I gave him my opinion, and I knew that his wishes I was going to follow, and I was good with that. And I just thought, oh man, I'm going to have to get cranked up here and start this whole train going again in 2 weeks, because you had to get in the weight room, because that was our MO, and I just knew, once as a head coach, I just couldn't believe how much. I could see why Mike stepped down, because even as an assistant head coach, I did so much, but I didn't deal with the school, I didn't deal with the parents, the media. And that just added another layer on things to where it got to where I was actually sleeping in our football office at CB West a couple nights a week.
Mike, you talk about the competitive nature of the program and how tough and rigorous one of his practices were. Just describe what a typical practice was like at Central Bucks West under the direction of head football coach Mike Pettine Sr.
Well, from the moment you walked out there, we had what we called specialties, which a lot of teams do, but most teams use their specialty period, which is about 15 minutes long, to do things three-quarter speed, work on technique. Mike wanted you out there 5 minutes before that. We had a loosening up program where each kid had to do it on their own. You went into specialties with your coach, and it was full bore. There was hitting involved. Then we loosened up, did our agilities, and then went into our individual drills, which all the individual drills were full speed, live. Then we went into some teamwork. We did team live all the time. I mean, one of the things that college coaches marveled at is the day before the game on Thursday, because we played Friday nights almost all the time. When we went offense, we went live against the defense. Now, they had arm pads on, but we went live go for 20 minutes. That's not something I preach now in today's game, with the numbers being the way they are, But Mike was like, I used to question him and say, Mike, because we would get guys nicked on Thursday that couldn't play on Friday. He goes, it's worth it. He goes, for the amount of live work we're getting, when we go into the game, the other teams don't even have 10% of this work, and it was true. One of the reasons we were a precise machine was how much live work we did in practice. And it showed in the games. My players told me all the time for many, many years, that the games were a delight and were so much easier than practice. And Mike coached the coaches during practice. If your motor wasn't running as a coach, if you weren't demanding a lot from your players, you got a short ticket on our staff. You weren't on our staff very long.
And that staff that you had, and there was a lot of names that obviously changed over the years, but that one time when you were able to have senior, junior, and also Dick Beck, including yourself, as we're talking to Mike Carey. What do you remember about one of the greatest staffs we've ever seen in Pennsylvania high school football history?
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. Mike's coaching tree is just, I really didn't give it a lot of credence until everybody's just been bringing it up to me the last week. When you look at the people that have coached under him, and everybody took away and emulate some part of Mike in their coaching style. Junior's very similar. Dick's got that intense, smart edge. Randy Cuthbert, who's now the AD, head football coach at Wissahickon. Frank Naylor, my cousin, who played with the Seattle Seahawks. It just goes on and on and on. And again, I have to tell you that you were not a coach on our team standing there doing nothing. He critiqued the coaches after. We'd have coaches meetings 2 times a week after practice, and he'd tear you down right in front of the whole staff. If you weren't doing what he thought, if your players weren't playing up to par, he went after the players, and he went after the coaches that had those players. And believe me, you didn't want to hear that, so you were out there the next day coaching your butt off, trying to get them to perform.
As a former high school football player, and these practices with the intensity, and we have to remember they're still kids, but when he ripped you up, or when he ripped up his players, how did he get them to continue to want to come back and stick it out? Because I wouldn't blame a kid if they were a sophomore in high school and let's just say they were like, okay, enough. I've had enough with this style.
Right. Good point. And I think that's the key is, being a psychologist through the whole thing. And one of the things I pride myself on is getting the most out of people. And first of all, you pick your moments. You would never use that technique or that intensity with a young kid, a 10th grader. If the 10th grader's playing, which now and then we'd have a 10th grader, it was very rare, but now and then we'd have a 10th grader that was playing. Of course, he's going to be in the mix. He's got to perform or his butt's going to be on the bench. The one thing that Mike did was, as much as he pour into you, and this was something that as a parent I even use with my kids, every moment he had that he could hug you, tell you were doing great in front of your peers, he did. And so what that made happen was that you'd want to run through a damn wall for him because you wanted that praise from him. You wanted that acceptance. You wanted that wink that, hey, that's the job I want. And that was his style.
And that's what made him so special, because those are the best coaches you could have. If you were going to give me a mock high school football coach, the first guy I'm thinking about really is Mike Pettine Sr., just because even though how intense he was, like you say, players, and I read some of the articles and some of your comments, still today, players that played for him 20, 25 years ago still love him. You mentioned some of those life lessons. Give me a little more life lessons that you learned from Coach Mike Pettine Sr.
Well, be prepared, have thick skin, never quit. The same thing that people think, well, it's kind of a cliche they hear, don't quit, but when you went through the style practices and off-season workouts and the running that we did, that took it to another level. It was almost like field training. Perseverance in the job, caring for your teammates and your partners. The team is much bigger than the individual. That was one of the biggest ones. We did have some stars, but it was always about the team. Always about the team.
And you guys got all the wins that you deserve, 326 of them to be exact, with 4 state titles and a few more even before the really crowning of a state champion. But, Mike Carey, before we let you run, you look back at some of the on-the-field memories. Give me a few on-the-field memories that are the most special to you with your time with Coach Mike Pettine Sr.
Well, you'll never not hear me talk about the great wins over CB East. We were playing them in the 80s. On Thanksgiving Day, and the game got so big, we played down at Del Val in front of 15,000, 17,000. But probably the one that comes to my mind was when we won our first state title on the field in 1991 against Erie Cathedral Prep. We were down at halftime, came back, and won the second half. Of course, a bad memory, as I brought up, 1993, having the number one team on the rope, losing in 28 seconds with the 28 seconds. But then the last 3 years of the 90s with Mike, when we, again, ran all three state titles and 45 wins. And right there at the end of the 99 game, I didn't know, right at that moment, it was our final moments together on the sideline. But me and him were such a team that he looked right at me and said, you better have the punt block on. And I looked at him and said, it was even caught on film, I've already called the punt block. And we had a couple different punt blocks, but we both thought that this one would work, and to see that come to fruition, and then the win right at the end there with that block punt, that was just so special.
I know you were a confidant of his, but if you don't mind, could you share us maybe what your last conversation was with him and how long ago that was?
Yeah, my last conversation with him was last Saturday, and he was driving to. He was up here from Florida. He lives in Florida in the off season, and still lives in the same house in Doylestown with his wife Joyce. And he was up here to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award in Harrisburg from, I believe, the Pennsylvania Football Coaches Association. And he called me and says, "Hey, Mike," that's how he talked. I said, "What's up, Coach?" He says, "How many state titles have you been to?" And I said, 11. And he starts laughing. He goes, "Yeah, I got to tell that tonight." I go, "What do you mean? Where are you?" He goes, "I'm on the turnpike going to Harrisburg. I'm getting this award." And he didn't even want to talk about the award. But we just, as always, went through our list of family, politics, finance, how's our health. About a lot of our players because they're our friends now. They've all grown up, and we talked for almost an hour, and I'm very, very happy I got a chance again to speak with him, and to say I was in shock is an understatement, because I always came away from seeing him and talking to him thinking, boy, he hasn't changed at all. He was in such great health. But you never know.
Well, Mike, once again, we do send our condolences to you, your family, and also the entire Pettine family and all of the Central Bucks West community. We do appreciate a few minutes today on what is a tough day for you, and we wish you all the best. Thanks so much, Mike.
You're welcome, Zach. God bless Mike Pettine.